what flex pen is the best for beginners? I'll go ahead and say that me personally, I do not consider myself an expert with flex pens. I really don't. I use them, I teach what I know about them, but I'm definitely not, especially when it comes to like vintage and stuff like that, I don't know what I'm doing there. So that's outside of my swim lane. So if you're looking for flex stuff, I can talk about the basics of flex pens. So if you are a beginner, my information is probably pretty well suited for you and not much more. So there's other people out there that know more about like the actual techniques and stuff and have like practiced it a lot. I just haven't, to be quite honest with you. So that is one thing where I fall short a little bit. But what I've found, we have sold a fair number of flex pens, most of them Noodler's pens because of the offerings they have there. There's also the Pilot Falcons, that seems to be pretty popular as well. There's some other pens that aren't really flex pens that people can use for flex pens, like the Platinum Balance or the Cool. That nib is a little bit flexy. And then the the Platinum PTL 5000A has got a bit of flexibility to it, but those really aren't flex pens necessarily. There's other pens like Stipula's got a T-Flex nib on a lot of their pens. There's other brands, I'm trying to think of like what else has flex pens. There's like the Stipula Splash, which has, had mixed reviews and stuff. So, really the choices are not that vast unless you go into vintage, and again, that's not really my area of expertise. So those of you who are into vintage stuff may have like better ideas, but the thing that I always had a challenge with myself, being a beginner getting into getting into flex pens back, it was like the first year that I was in fountain pens, before really anybody knew who Goulet pens was. I wanted to get into flex pens just like everybody does because it's so cool. But there was no easy option back then. There was a Pilot Falcon, and that's it. That was pretty much the only thing 4 years ago, before Noodlers came out. There was really not much else, unless you went with like a custom grind from a Nibmeister kind of thing, but there was no commercially made thing. Noodlers has really done a lot to bring awareness about flex pens and to help to get flex pens in people's hands, for better or for worse. So for me, I had a huge kind of issue myself of finding a good flex pen, and I ended up going vintage. I found a site that had some vintage pens, and I bought them and I paid like $150, for a flex pen, like a vintage Waterman, 52 and stuff like that. And it flexed some, but it really wasn't much better than like a Noodler's pen, And it's the tough thing about like the vintage stuff is you really have to kind of know what you're getting, and because it's vintage, the prices are going to be all over the place, the availability is going to be all over the place, there's no steady stock of anything. So that's the challenge there. So the thing that I like about Noodlers is now that they have adequate quantities of most everything, there's still a lot of ebonites and acrylics and the Nipponsets that are short on stock. That's just going to be the case with Noodlers, with anything that's relatively new. They're going to be super out of stock. Yeah, I would say that the number one pen for beginners that I would say would be the Noodler's Ahab. Now I know the Nib Creeper is a little bit cheaper, and the Conrad is, the piston mechanism. Some people like that a little better. But the Ahab, the size is a little more comfortable than the Ahab for some people. But the Ahab is nice because it is a larger size, but that makes it actually easier to start writing with the pen. It might not like ultimately be your favorite size, but when you're kind of just starting out and getting into it, that larger size makes it easier to hold, gives you a little more leverage when you're trying to flex it. And just in general, that pen tends to be a little less troublesome than some of the other ones. So that would probably be my choice. That pen's got a large ink capacity. You can convert it to an eyedropper for even larger ink capacity. So that would be my recommendation. It would be a Noodler's Ahab.